Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, today let's start with creating a sample user registration service. Okay, so let's say we do have a user. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to start with Spring Boot. Okay. I think you can check with the management, Nitin. Okay, they do have the course content. They will share it with you. Okay, thank you. What we can do, we can just start with developing a Spring Boot web application. Let's say I just have to do I just wanted to develop one service, which is something called a user registration service. Okay. But here we'll be using the Spring Boot approach to communicate with the database and store the records, whatever the data that we are going to pass as an end user. So don't worry about the notes, everyone. So I'll be giving the notes maybe from day after tomorrow, because tomorrow is the last demo session. Okay. So I just wanted to do a user registration service. So here I just wanted to create one user DTO, and I just wanted to create a user entity. And there will be a user controller, user service, and user repository. So these are the 5 different classes and interfaces that we are going to develop for this user registration service Spring Boot application. Okay. So in order to create a Spring Boot application, so there is a tool provided in the online. This is something called start.spring.io. This is a Spring initializer. We can just select a Maven, choose a Maven project, but later on we will select the Gradle also, but not right now. So here I just wanted to make this as com.nareshit.registration.system. And here, I just wanted to rename the artifact as user registration service. And the artifact is also the same. I think name is not required for me. I just wanted to select the latest Java 17 version because that is the LTS version. So I just wanted to add 3 dependencies. One is web, and another is JPA because I have to interact with the database. And then the other dependency is MySQL because this is the driver which is required to connect. And then probably I will also add Lombok. So this Lombok is used to generate setters, getters, constructors, and everything for us. So I just wanted to generate it now. Yeah. So let me copy this path and open IntelliJ. So here I just wanted to open this project directly. So let it scan all the files and do the indexing, because it basically has to download all these dependencies, right? So that's the reason it is taking this much amount of time. So all these dependencies which are required for developing this application. Okay. Okay, now it's done. I just wanted to open this, and I just wanted to rename this to user registration system. Okay. And I just wanted to copy paste the same over here. Sorry, font size. Clear? Yeah. So now here, what I just wanted to do, I just wanted to create 3 different packages. One is for creating a controller package, which is something called the API package. And I just wanted to create a service package. I just wanted to create a repository package. I just wanted to create 2 other packages, which is DTO, and another one is entity. Okay, all these different packages. So now there's something called user registration API, and there is something called a service. I will just create an interface, user service or user registration service. And I'll just create a user registration service IMPL. And next, I just wanted to create a user DTO. And I'll create a user entity. And user repository. This is the interface. That's it. Okay. Now, what we will do, we'll just create some fields inside this. Private email, local date time, date of birth. What are all the other fields that we do have? Mobile number. And then any other fields? So can we just take a very simple use case, not to make it much complicated? So here, I will just copy all these fields, and I will just go to the user entity. And here, I just wanted to create one more user ID. Okay, only these fields. Now we have actually used the Lombok, right, as a dependency. So here on top of this class, I just wanted to use a builder. First of all, I'll tell you what is the builder required for. And there is something called the all-aux constructor, no-aux constructor, and @data. So this annotation is going to generate setters, getters, equals hash code, and toString method. And this is just going to generate a no argument constructor, and this is going to generate all arguments constructor for this fields. And there is something called a builder. This is an alternative approach to create the builder design pattern for our classes. Okay. So the next thing, use the same annotations on top of this user entity also. And I just wanted to use some more annotations over here, entity. I'll tell you about entity in a bit. And there is something called table. So here, I just wanted to create the table name as users. And this is annotated with @entity. Anyone has idea on JPA? Little bit. Okay. So what we are actually doing, we are actually going to give the user DTO as a JSON object. That means whenever you go to any of the web pages, just go to nareshit.com. Yeah. So I just wanted to click on login over here, and there is something called register. So we are exactly doing the same steps. So here we are going to enter the username, mobile number, email address, password, and confirm password. But right now we are not taking this. And we are actually clicking on the continue, which is actually going to register a user in the database. So in the previous sessions, I have basically said, whenever you are submitting a form, it is basically a post request. That means it has to contain some data from the end user in order to use the data and insert that data into the database finally. Okay. So I just wanted to do the same thing over here, but I don't want to use entity as a JSON. I just wanted to use user DTO because entity is something which is having a direct communication with the database. We cannot use entity as our JSON request data. That means if you see here, this is a form data, right? So this is actually, these values will be actually mapped to some DTOs. Okay, so DTOs are actually used for the UI layer. That UI layer, or whatever the client, Angular client or React client, whenever it is going to submit some data, that data has to map to our DTOs. Got it? So we cannot use entities as JSON requests. Okay, so anyone knows how to create a JSON for this particular class? Anyone? How to create a JSON for this particular class? Anyone knows about JSON first of all? Yes, it's a JavaScript object notation. So basically, you know about class, right? Class has open brace and closed brace. We need to create a JSON exactly like this. I just wanted to enter over here. So here, if I just have to create a JSON for this user DTO, I just have to create like this. And here, what is the key name? This is the one. I just have to give it in string, and then the value is something like this one. And this is also has to be a string. Okay, and you need to give a comma, and then probably you can just give a date of birth. So here I can just take the local date only because it's a date of birth, right? So it doesn't need a time also. Okay, so the next thing, we need to take the date of birth, and here and just give it as 2019, the month, and 02. And the last one is mobile number. I can just take it over here. Just give the same thing, and I just have to give the number as 630-3010-890. Okay, so this is a mobile number. Okay, now I will just take this. Cut this. I'll just go to the postman first of all. So right now I don't have a UI. I will be using a postman client in order to submit the data, form data. So here I will just make it as users. And here, just go and paste this data. Okay. Now, probably, do I have this endpoint in my application? No. So what I can do, I will just go to this user registration API. I'll go on top of this class and I will just annotate with this @REST controller and then followed by request mapping. And here, I just want to give it as users. And here, I just wanted to give register. And on top of this, so what type of request it is? It's a post request, right? So probably there is something called @post mapping. I just have to use this. Okay, so here if you see that, what is this 8080 and localhost? Okay, so this is where our application is running on Tomcat server. Okay, so Tomcat server initially starts on 8080 port. So when we actually run our Spring Boot application behind the scenes, a Tomcat server will be created and it will run on port 8080 by default. Okay. So here what I need to do, one more thing. So here we are actually passing this data, right? So this data, that means these fields are actually going to represent one DTO class. So that DTO is user DTO. Okay. So I'll take this user DTO. I'll just go to this user registration service and I will just import this because it is in a different package. I just wanted to make this as a parameter. Now, when we are actually passing some data from this postman, how it actually takes or considers this data. And there is one annotation, which is something called request body. So what this request body actually does, it actually has email, date of birth, and mobile number, right? So all these keys. And these keys have to match whatever the type of object or class that you are going to define over here. So user DTO has all these fields. And if anything is not matched, like let's say there is a mobile, only mobile is there. So it will not set this mobile number. So it has to match the particular keys, otherwise it will not be setting it. Okay. Now the other thing is, just go to this user registration API. And let's see if we are going to get this data or not by actually doing a sysout. I'll just print user DTO, and that's it. Got it? Now, I'll just start this application. But before that, I need to comment this data API. I will uncomment it later on. Because when we actually add these dependencies, it actually asks some database related information. Right now, we are just running this application as a plain web application. Okay. So let's start this and replace this. Okay. Now, I'll just go to this main application, the main class. I will just start this with run user registration system. Okay, so 1 second. So basically this dependency is actually required. So let's do one thing. Let's add the database related dependencies also from our side. Unless we can't use this. Just refresh this. I'll just go to this resources path. There is something called application.properties. So here, what I will basically do, so there is something called spring.data source. Let me restart it. If you are not getting application.properties pop-ups, whatever the properties which are existed, you can just restart your IDE. It will show those related properties, whatever are all existing. Yeah. So it's not coming. So let me go to this plugins. So in the plugins, probably you can install the Spring Boot related annotations. So Spring Boot plugins, which will pop up. Okay. So let me type it from my side, or there is something called Hibernate JPA auto configuration. So if you just go to this, there is something, some properties are there, which is actually data source auto configuration and data source properties. There are some prefixes defined over here. So spring.data source, use that. So we need to give the database URL, and we'll just go back. And if you see here, in this auto configuration, it is asking about the driver class name, which is not required. I just wanted to give URL, username, and the password, only these three data. So now I'll just go to this application.properties. And here is something called JDBC : MySQL : and then, so if you don't know about it, just go to this Hibernate JPA auto configuration, and there is something called data source auto configuration. And here you will find this details, which is something related to the database driver. Just go to this classes. And here you will be finding all the supported databases by Spring. There is a H2 database. This is an in-memory database. We'll see that tomorrow. And there is something called MySQL. And if you see here, the driver name is this. And there's a actual thing. And this is a MySQL. And if you just go to this, this is just a enum. If you just see this database driver is just a enum. Okay. So this enum is basically having a lot of databases information. Derby, it is going to support H2, HSQLDB, SQLite, MySQL, MariaDB, Oracle, right? And so many other types of database which are available in the market. So Spring Boot supports almost all the databases which are present in the market. So this is somewhere, the auto configuration classes. See, previously, if you see that, I will just show one example, which is Spring JPA example. Just go through some examples and we will see what they are going to actually do. Just see this data JPA. Okay, they are actually using Spring Boot Starter. I just wanted to get Spring Hibernate example annotation configuration. So what happens if you are not using Spring and wanted to use Spring Boot? Okay, so if you see this, when Spring Boot is not present in the market, we need to write one big configuration class which has complete information. So If you want to go with XML, you need to define basic data source, URL, username, password, and then session factory, and then followed by Hibernate transaction manager and all these kind of things. But here, if you see this configuration class, there's something called this is the one. Let's see this. Entity, service, this is a plain XML. Let me search for the configurations. Yeah, see here. If you see here, he has written one simple configuration class, which has local session factory bean. What basically he is doing, he's adding a data source. To this data source, he is creating a bean by submitting the URL, right? The driver class name and something related to the transaction manager, properties, which are actually shows equal, true, and all these kind of things. We don't have to write this big configuration class. I just wanted to copy this. I just wanted to go over here. And if you see this, it has almost 50 lines of code, right? So what he's basically doing, he's actually, preparing the local session factory bean, where he is actually setting some data source details, which is something called basic data source. He's actually giving the driver class name, setting the URL, setting the username, setting the password, and all these kind of things. But if you just go to the next step, there's something called platform transaction manager and all this. Do we have to do all these kind of things if you are using Spring Boot? Okay, so let me close everything and let's go to the application.properties. And here I just wanted to give localhost. I'm using MySQL, so by default it runs on port 3306, and I just wanted to make this as users. Only the URL of the database, and I just have to give the username and the password. Dot username. The username is root, and the password is this is my kid name. Okay, so now what I can do, I can just simply go to this user registration service. But before going to that, I just wanted to open the Hibernate JP auto configuration. And I just wanted to go to the JPA properties. Don't worry about this. I will be taking a one separate session on this. There's something called spring.jpa dot show SQL. I just wanted to add that in this show SQL equal to true. Okay. Now what we can do, we can just close all the tabs. I just wanted to open my database, the local database. And I just wanted to go to this local host 3306 of the database. And here I just wanted to create the database users. Click on apply and finish. Okay, now the users database is already there. And now if I just go and start this application, but before that, if you just see, we have actually created a table for this entity. This entity is having a direct communication with the database. So here, the next step, what we need to do, there is something called @ID. So this is basically to create a primary key of the database. And I just wanted to generate it automatically @generated value. And there is something called a strategy. And you can just, there are some strategies, auto, identity, and UUID also. But right now I just wanted to use auto. And here you can give @ columns also for this, but it's up to you. But basically, the good convention is basically we need to give the column names also. I just wanted to give it as email. Wanted to copy the same thing. And here we have actually taken the local date, not the time. So I just wanted to comment this out. And here I just wanted to give DOB. And then finally, this is a @ column name equal to mobile_number. Okay. So now what will happen when we run this application? Basically, it will see whether all these informations are correct or not. So first, it will just see the URL of the database. It's correct. And then probably it will use the username and password as this. And then it will totally see if the user's database is already present in our local database or not. If it is present, then probably for this user entity, a table will be created with all these fields. Let's see that. Let's start our application and run this. So we need to give one more property to create some tables automatically behind the scenes. Okay, now the application has been started. Okay, but if you just go to this database and just refresh this, there are no tables over here. Do you know the reason why? We are not passing? No. The table has to be created behind the scenes. That is the advantage of using Spring Boot, right? There is some property which is already there. Anyone knows about it? Hibernate JP auto configuration. Let's go to this Hibernate JP auto configuration, and there is something called Hibernate properties. So here, if you see that, there is something called a DDL auto. So this is actually a shortcut for which will actually create or drop a table whenever we need it. So what is the prefix for this? Spring.jpa.hibernate. I'll just use this. And I'll just go to the application.properties. And we'll just copy paste the same. And DDL auto equal to, I just wanted to update. That means if there is a new entity over here, it will just create an entity. And you can see the logs also over here, because let me run this application one more time. Stop and rerun. And let's see whether it is going to create the database table or not. Yeah. Now, if you can see the log, it has created the table behind the scenes. And if you just go to this database and just refresh it, there's a user table. I just wanted to click on this. And you can see user ID, DOB, email, mobile number. So let's say how this user_ID has been created, because we have not given any column name. That's the reason I'm saying, if you just go to this entity, even if you don't mention the column names, by default, it will take the property name as a column name. But let's say if you have date of birth as camel case, do you know if we have not used the column, it will actually create date_of_birth. It will create a column like this in database. Got it? So that's the total idea. So now I just wanted to comment it out. And now we will see whether the request is getting submitted to our user registration API or not. I just wanted to start this application in debug mode. And let's see if everything works out or not for this. So let me restart this application in debug mode. And if you see the log, first of all, over here, our application, this is a web application, right? Since we have added the dependency of web module. So this application will start on 8080. If you see this, the application is running on port 8080 on the server. And probably if you just go to this Postman, we have the localhost 8080. Now, which endpoint we need to trigger? That's the question. If you just go to the user registration service on the top, this is the root URL of this API. Whenever we are going to click on this send, just click on this send now. You see that we are getting the trigger point over here. And if you see that, whatever the values that I have submitted in the JSON, by default, they are coming over here. Understood? So the only magic that it will do, so whenever we are sending some post data, that means a form data or whatever it is, the JSON data. So when there is a request body annotation before that DTO, whatever the properties that are actually matching with this user DTO, it will map these values to this property keys. So, and the result of this one is this itself. Now I just wanted to press and pass through. Now, if you just see the console, we just have got this details. Okay. Now the next step, what we need to do, I just wanted to go to this user registration service and I just wanted to keep public void register, just register, and I'm going to get user DTO. Okay. Now I will just go to this user registration service MPL. What I need to do, I just have to implement that. And probably we'll just go to this. And probably we have this. Now, how to call this method from this user registration API? So first, we need to take the reference of that user registration service, not the IMPL, only the interface we need to, okay? And we need to do AutoWire. And make sure that AutoWire will search for this particular object in the application context factory, but make sure that you use @component, go to the implementation class and use @service, not @component, because @service, @component, @REST controller, all are meant for creating objects. But in Spring, all these annotations has been segregated. So if you see this, I have called this class as API. I have called this class as service, and I have called this as repository. Why? To segregate. That means we are making the application as modular, right? So whenever there is some other class coming in, we can just add the dependency in the user registration API as a dependency over here. That's it. Okay. Now I just wanted to take this .user registration service, user registration service dot, and then probably I just have to pass the user DTO. That's it. I don't have to do anything else. Okay. And let's go to this user registration service MPL. And this is a service. Basically, it will do some validations, whether the email is present or date of birth is correct or not, something like that. But we will not be doing any validations. We will just insert the data into the database and see how it is actually working. Now, there's something called a user registrations repository. This basically has to extend the CRUD repository where we actually perform some CRUD operations. Create, retrieve, update, and delete. That means create a user, retrieve a user, update a user, and delete a user. Okay. Now here, what is the first type that we need to give? So this CRUD repository is actually belonging to the user entity. I just have to give that. And what is the primary key for this? Integer. Just go back and add that as integer. That's it. And nothing you need to do. Okay, now go to the user registration service IMPL, take the dependency of private user registration repository, and do AutoWire. Got it? Now, this is the interface, right? But we have kept AutoWide. How it will work? Okay. So here, even if it is the interface, there are so many implementation classes. So for this interface, a proxy class is going to be created by the Spring internally in order to make a call to the respective methods. I will show it to you in debugging mode. Then only you will understand. Okay. So here, this dot user registration repository dot, there are some methods already available. There's something called a save. And here, if you see that the parameter has to be an entity. That's the reason if you just go to this user entity, this has been annotated with @entity. Otherwise, this will not be registered as a database entity in the JPA context. Got it? If this is not annotated with @entity, then this will not save this. So here, I cannot use a user DTO over here because DTO is not an entity. So here, what I need to do instead of that, so there I have to convert this user DTO to the user entity. Then only I can save the user entity, right? So now I will use user entity, and there is a builder, right? For that, this builder, use the builder and set all the fields. I don't have to set the user ID because user ID will be automatically generated. And if you see the user entity, this is auto. So we don't have to set it. The next thing, we need to set the email, and email, where we'll be getting it. So we'll be getting it from the DTO dot get email. And then probably we do have dot mobile number. We'll be getting it from the DTO dot get mobile number. And then finally, date of birth, user DTO dot get date of birth. And then finally, we will call a build. This will actually return the user entity with all the fields set. And I can just pass this user entity to the save in order to save the information to the database. Okay. But why I have used DTO over here? DTO, let's say I'm not doing any validations. We can also use validations whether the email is empty or not, whether the mobile number is there or not, whether the length of the mobile number is 10 or not, something like that. We can do that validations over here. Okay. After that, we can convert that DTO to the user entity like this. And then finally, we can save the user entity, right? Now, what I can do, let me restart the application in debug mode, and let's see what happens behind the scenes. Okay. Okay, the application has been started. Now we'll just go to this send, and it has been triggered over here. We'll just go to this next step. So user registration service dot register. It came to here, and probably we will get all the fields, whatever the fields that we have submitted, everything we will get it over here. And then probably the next step, we'll build that, and then probably we will save that. If I just refresh the console over here, I'll just click on this one. And if you see here, it has inserted the data into the database. And if you can just go and see the database information, we can just see the data over here. This is the total idea. Okay, but I just wanted to ask one question over here. How this interface is actually working? See, for every interface, we do have some implementation classes. But behind the scenes, this is an interface and this is a save method. This is a save method, which is a simple abstract method. But how it is actually doing the stuff inside, the Spring framework, how it is actually doing it. Interface will not work on the fly. There has to be implementation class, right? So I just wanted to submit the request again, and we will see with different ID. Test. Okay. Now I'll just send it. And now we will see that user registration service. And then probably I will go to this. And here, if you see this, can you see something over here? There is something called $proxy 103. That means, what is the name of this dynamic proxy? Okay, so let me expand this first of all for you all. There is something called simple JPA repository. This is a class. Based on this class, it is going to create a proxy class. Proxy class means it is basically using a simple JPA repository, which is an existing class in the Spring Framework library. It is basically using this class to create a proxy class. That means basically it is going to create $proxy 103 class, which extends simple JPA repository. And this is a part of CRUD repository, right? So basically it is going to create a proxy class and going to start a transaction. And at the end of the transaction, once the database operation is done. So this is the logic behind it. So interfaces will not work. There has to be some certain implementation classes, but Spring is basically going to create the proxy classes for interfaces, which are going to extend the CRUD repository or the JPA repository. Okay, so CRUD repository, using CRUD repository, we can only do 4 different operations: create, retrieve, update, and delete. And there is something called a JPA repository. So we can also use JPA repository. So this JPA repository, behind the scenes, it provides CRUD operations, plus there is a mechanism to provide sorting of the records, pagination of the records, and all this kind of things. It is going to provide all those things behind the hood. Okay, but what I'm saying, right now we are actually doing insertion operation. We are just saving the data into the database. Do we require JPA repository for that? Whatever we need to extend only that particular repository. If we are not using those functionalities, even extending that can pop up so many methods over here. If you just go to the repository, you can see there are n number of methods. Delete in bash, delete by ID in bash. There is something called get reference by ID, find all, and everything, right? So if you just see this, this also extends a list CRUD repository. And it has also some methods, find all by ID, find all. And also it is going to extend the CRUD repository behind the scenes. And this is going to extend the repository interface. So that's the total idea. Okay. So I just wanted to close all the tabs and now open application.properties. So if you see the old convention code over here, we have actually seen this. Yeah. Okay, I have actually copied the code here, right? Yeah. So this is the configuration class. It has component scan. It has enable transaction management. That means whenever we are operating on the database, we need to enable the transaction management. Okay. And then if you see, there's a local session factory. Right now in our Spring Boot application, this local session factory has been created automatically by Spring Boot, not a Spring. Okay. And we have actually not created any objects for basic data source. And we are actually giving only the URLs. This bean will be created. That means this configuration class is plainly from Spring JPA itself. So if we are working with Spring applications, we need to write this configuration class in order to establish the database connection. But here, we are just giving only these properties. And behind the scenes, it is going to create some auto configuration stuff. Okay. So, but how this data or the property keys is actually being used by Spring Boot? There is something called Hibernate JPA auto configuration. And if you see that there are some auto configuration, data source auto configuration. And if you just see over here, there is something called data source properties dot class. And there is a prefix over here. Spring.data source dot URL. Now we will see what is there inside this class. There is something called initialize data source builder. That means if you see the plain Spring, they have actually created the data source bean by writing a method. But here we do have everything in the auto configuration classes provided by Spring Boot. So here basically what it is actually doing, it is basically going to get the class loader. It is going to determine the driver class name. So right now we have not given any driver class name, right? Have we given any driver class name? No. So what is happening over here? So we have not given driver class name. So this method will not be executed. Now, so initially the driver class name is null. So next thing, what it is going to do from JDBC, this.url.get driver class name. If you just go to this method, there is something called this.url. Where is this URL provided? In the application properties. Basically, it is going to get this two properties, JDBC : MySQL, and behind the scenes, it is going to get the driver class name. So here, what it is actually doing, it is actually seeing whether it has any text or not. If it is not having any text, then probably it is going to throw fail to determine a suitable driver. We don't have to give a driver class name. That is not mandatory. If you provide the URL itself, it can get the driver class name from this two prefixes. One is JDBC : MySQL. It is basically going to take this MySQL and identify the database automatically. We don't have to give the driver class name. But previously, when we are working in Spring framework with plain JDBC, we need to provide the driver class name also. Okay. So right now it is not required in Spring Boot. Only by providing the URL, it will get this MySQL directly from the URL, and it is going to identify that it's a MySQL database. And once it identifies that it is a MySQL database, it will just use this username and password to authenticate to my local database. Once it is authenticated, it will see that there is, whether there is a user's database or not. If it is there, then probably it will try to create entities, whatever the entities that are there, annotated with @entity. It will basically create table for this entity. And what is the table name that we have given? Users. So with this table users, the table will be created with some columns like user_ID, email, date of birth, and mobile number. And that is the result of this particular database columns of the particular table users. Got it? Any questions from anyone? Nitin Jagannath. We can use multiple data sources, but that's not a part of this. We'll just discuss when we go further. Okay. We can also create multiple data sources. I'll tell you the use case when we need to use multiple data sources. When we are actually developing multi-tenant based applications or microservices, we need to use multiple data sources because one tenant can use MySQL and one tenant can use tenants here are basically clients. Okay. So we can use multi-data source for different clients that we do have. So implementation class object reference store into interface reference variable. Okay. So anything specific? Any questions over here right now? Okay, I'll take it as no. Okay. So so behind the scenes, let's explore this Hibernate JP auto configuration. What is the meaning of @enable configuration properties? Anyone knows about it, first of all? Anyone knows about this annotation, what it actually does? Anyone from online? No one has any knowledge on this? Create bean automatically. Apart from this, any other answer from anyone? Nitin, Jagannath, do you know this? What is this enable? Enables configuration, that is fine, but what it is actually going to do? Okay, so let me take some properties, okay? So I'll just go to the application.properties, and I just wanted to define my own properties. I just wanted to use email dot key dot API key. And here I just wanted to define some this is a API key. So so API keys are basically encrypted. I will show you how to encrypt this API keys later on. But right now I have given some type of dummy encrypted key. Okay. So let's say there is something called email dot key dot. There's something called client secret. So here I just wanted to give one simple secret, which is just a secret. Very simple. Now, how can I return this email properties by designing one get mapping endpoint? So anyone? So first of all, I will just go to this user DTO. I'll just create email key DTO or email keys DTO. So on top of this, I just wanted to do @enable configuration properties. And then I just wanted to give a prefix. Okay. So here, let's go to this enable configuration properties. And here, basically, we do have this @enable configuration properties. And this is the annotation, custom annotation that we can use. But here, I just wanted to give one email keys DTO dot class. Okay. But here, can we use @enable configuration properties directly? So if you see this existing Hibernate JPA auto configuration, here they have given JPA properties dot class. That means they have basically used it in the main class, and here they have actually given a prefix, right? So just go back and keep this as @configuration properties, because those are the properties which we have actually defined in our application.properties. So here I need to give prefix. And what is the prefix that we can give? Email.key. To trigger this annotation, what I need to do? I need to go to the main class, and I just have to use @enable configuration properties of what I need to do now? Yeah, email keys DTO.class. That's it. So now basically what we are doing, we are actually using @enable configuration properties of this email keys DTO. If you just go to this, and there is email.key. If you just go to this application.properties, there's something called API key and client secret. Now I just wanted to go to this. I just wanted to private string API key, private string client secret. Got it? Now I just have to provide the data attribute to provide setter, getter, constructor, whatever it is. And at the rate builder, I just wanted to use a builder. I don't want to use a builder for now. I just wanted to return this email keys DTO. That's it. Okay. So I think probably it will work, right? If you just go to this at the rate data, basically it is using getter, setter, required args, constructor, toString equals and hash code and everything. So everything is there. Now I just wanted to go to this user registration API and I just wanted to create a simple get endpoint public. There's something called email keys DTO and get email config properties. And this is a simple get mapping. And I just wanted to provide /email in a string. And here, I don't have to do anything. I just have to do private email keys DTO. Just auto-wire it and return this. So here, we'll just go to this application.properties. If any prefix is matching, that means this prefix is matching with the application.properties. It will just go ahead and see whether the key is same or not. If the key is same, it will just give that value, this value to this property. The same like for client secret also. Okay. Now, what we can do, we can just go to this user registration system, and then probably we will start this application, run this application, stop and rerun. And now, instead of starting it in running mode, I will just start it in debug mode because we need to see what is happening behind the scenes, right? Stop it and restart it in debug. Okay, it has started. Now what I will do, I'll just go to this Postman first of all, and users /email, but that is a get mapping, right? Just use this, and I'll just click on send, and we will see whether the endpoint is being called or not. Yes, this is called, and if you see that in the email DTO we have all these properties set. That is the meaning of @enable configuration properties followed by @configuration properties of the prefix which we have used in the application.properties for keys. Okay, so that's the total idea. And when we are going to run this, we're just going to get all these properties. Got it? So sometimes there will be a need that booking service has this keys and it has to give it to some notification system service, the properties like the API key and the client secret in order to trigger an email. Okay, so that's the total reason. Let me ask Suresh Prasad. What do you mean that it is a 9 a.m. batch, Suresh? I think some people who are new, one of the candidates is new over here. Let me check that one. So Nitin Jagannath, I think probably there are so many, I think 4 classes are already done. So I think 3 classes, 3 demo sessions are already done. We are actually proceeding with the demo sessions. So tomorrow is the last demo session, and probably we will be continuing with our mini project from the next week probably. So probably we will do everything from scratch. Okay, and we will start to develop the mini project. But before that, till this weekend, we will be going through all the steps of Spring Core, how this auto configuration is going to work in Spring Boot, what is the use of actuator, the different set of advantages that we are going to get using Spring Boot, and all these kind of things. We'll just go through all this till this weekend, and probably from next week, we will start the mini project. Okay. Yeah. So any questions from anyone, first of all? Okay, Suresh raised his hand, and I think, let me see if there are any other people. Okay. Anyone wanted to ask any specific questions? Sorry. Yeah, see, basically, booking service is one single service Spring Boot application. It is a single Spring Boot application. Let's say there's a booking service, there is a payment service, there is a notification service. Notification service is a separate Spring Boot application which has to send an email. But in order to send an email, there has to be some certain keys. Right now, we will use email, username, password. In real time, we are not going to use that. Okay. So in real time, even whatever the username and password that is there for our email account will not be using plain passwords or usernames. In real time, we are going to encrypt those with some encrypted data. So if you are just signing up a user where you are taking the password as the and also confirm password, you cannot store the password in a plain format in the database. Everyone can see that, right? So we need to encrypt that. So to encrypt that, we do have a lot of encryption mechanisms. Even whatever the data that we are going to send from here in the Postman, if you just see here, I'm sending email, date of birth, mobile number, right? But we cannot send this data like this. We have to send everything, email also, email as encrypted, date of birth as encrypted, and also mobile number also encrypted. We cannot send these details in a, when we are submitting a form, we cannot send these details because there might be hackers, right? They can see this information and they can see this mobile number. Somewhere at some point of time, they can use this mobile number in order to generate some OTPs randomly through some attacks. We do have CSRF attacks. We do have XSS attacks. All these attacks I will be explaining you when we start with the project. We cannot send this data as a plain data. We are not going to give any security for this, right? Let's say if the user is registering with one application, which is a finance based application or a stock market based application. Let's say if he's going to send the details, if the hacker sees those details, what will happen? Yeah, he can recognize it, but later he can change the password, right? But probably he has some details with the hacker. Basically, he can run some client-side scripts in order to perform some operations without his intervention. So I will explain all those things once we start with the UI part in the second month. Okay, we cannot send this data like a plain data. Right now, we are sending it as email and then date of birth, mobile number. We can also send a password and confirm password, right? So we will not be doing all those kind of things. So we have to encrypt the complete data, and the data, whatever we are passing, even if the hacker sees, he will not be able to understand the encrypted data. Can you see this encrypted data? Let's say I just wanted to make this clear. Here, I just wanted to call this as email username, and then I just wanted to call it as email password. And here also, let's say this as encrypted with some 5T. Let's say. If you just see one of my databases, can you see this booking ID? I'll tell you all these kind of things once we actually work on the encryption mechanisms. Okay, don't worry about that. Okay, and that's the end of the session. So tomorrow we'll be digging into deep on this example, what is happening behind the scenes, how it is actually creating data source, and how it is actually determining from our URL what is the MySQL and all these kind of things. And also we'll look into embedded databases, which is provided by Spring Boot automatically. Okay, so embedded databases is one of the great feature which we can use it for various testing environments like QA, UAT, and pre-production. We'll work on embedded databases, database connections, and I will also explain one flaw inside that. What is the disadvantage of using embedded database connections in the production environment? Okay, we'll just see all those kind of scenarios maybe tomorrow. I think the time is already up. We can continue tomorrow. If you don't have any questions, probably the session is done. Yeah. Ashok, no, these are only the demo sessions. So I make demo sessions as the basic, concerns people will have. They don't know how to work on Spring. What is Spring? Why we are using Spring framework? All these kind of things, I will be covering it in demo. But the major classes will not be like this. Ashok. Yeah, we'll be using tools. I have already shown these tools in the beginning of the introduction sessions, so you don't have to worry about this. We will be using a lot of tools. You'll come to know once you are a part of the mini project, first of all, that we are going to develop initially. Okay. I think you don't have to be good in Spring, because Spring related sessions also will be covered in the mini project, but we will be starting the mini project. And in the mini project, I will be telling you how to set up the Spring core related components when we are actually working on the mini project with various integrations like Kafka and the database systems like MySQL as well as Docker. Okay, Ashok. So speed, I mean speed or slow the sessions. Okay. What are all the projects in this? What are all the projects? That means, what do you mean, Naresh M? I need to share this every time because there are a lot of people who are really joined over here. These are the projects that we have developed for the existing real-time batch. So we have done with the movie ticket booking system, which is a mini project. So it has a Kafka integration also. I'll just show you how we have actually used it. I'll just go to this movie ticket booking system and I will just stop this application. And let's just go to this movie ticket booking system. Okay, remove from the list. Yeah, I think the session is almost done here. You can leave, yeah. Srinivas. I think I don't have that in my system. Let me clone that. And here, I just wanted to check this out. New project from version control. And I just wanted to enter my Git URL. So whatever the projects that I am developing, I'm pushing the code every day. And if you can see that already there are lots of people who have actually cloned this application. And here, if you can see that this is a mini project, I'll just switch to the branches. There is something called Feign Client Payment Gateway and Kafka Payment Gateway. I will just select on this and we'll check out. And if you can see that there are lots and lots of, implementations which are done across most of the services like booking service, payment service, notification service, and API gateway. And if you can see, this is the Docker Compose file. I'll tell you how to write this Docker Compose and define all the services like Eureka server, the booking service, the payment service, the API gateway, and all these kind of things. And also there is something called an infrastructure module where we have actually written the Kafka related configurations, how we have defined these images. I'll tell you about all these kind of things because I'm telling you that the mini project will be very much complicated. That's the reason during these demo sessions, I'm giving a lot of information only on the basic knowledge to make sure the people who are not having any knowledge on Spring, I just wanted to make them strong in the core knowledge so that whatever the basic annotations that I'm using in the further sessions, probably it might help them, everyone. Okay. Major project will be on the e-commerce domain, Naresh. The mini project is something like the entertainment domain. So we'll be working on the entertainment part. Okay. So yeah, I think that's all. I think it's almost behind the time. So I'll just unshare my screen and probably we can meet tomorrow to get some understanding on in-depth Spring Boot libraries and classes that are being used behind the scenes. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day and happy learning.